America may have some of the most advanced surveillance systems on Earth, hovering over its enemies. But identifying rival targets won't do much unless the country has a way to destroy them effectively. And today, the US is struggling to pack a successful punch. It's not that the country can't assemble a powerful payload. The American B-83 bomb, part of the nation's active nuclear arsenal, can deliver up to 1.2 megatons of yield power, roughly 80 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. Detonation would be so strong that officials have reportedly even considered using it as a method of defense against incoming asteroids in the event of a potential collision with Earth. The problem is that releasing a bomb this mighty against an enemy target runs the risk of taking out thousands of civilians and igniting a diplomatic nightmare. Engineers need to design a bomb that's both sufficiently contained to limit its damage to a specific area and powerful enough to counter their enemies' increasingly fortified defenses. So far, no one has managed to find just the right balance, and time seems to be running out. According to recent investigations, Iran has managed to carve out dozens of missile cities deep inside granite mountains where payloads and equipment can be transported through a vast network of tunnels via train. During the recent war against the Iranian regime, the United States and Israel have attempted to shut down these underground facilities by striking their entrances. However, all it takes to reopen them is a couple of bulldozers and heavy trucks. The US knows the only way to get rid of these sites for good is to hit them at their core. Yet even its most capable payloads don't seem ready for a mission like this. In a recent interview, Dr. Amichai Middleman from the Department of Civil Engineering at Ariel University assessed, quote, "The mountains in Iran provide a level of protection 50 to 100 meters thick of rock that's hard to crack even by heavy bombs. Firing bunker-penetrating bombs, such as those dropped on the nuclear facilities in Operation Midnight Hammer in June. The GBU-57 bombs would have difficulty penetrating the interior of the mountain." According to Middleman, even if America attempted to fire multiple bombs at once, each payload driving deeper into the crater left by the previous one, it is unlikely that enemy underground facilities could be completely put out of service. This has left the Air Force searching for a new solution, and even if its novel GBU-57 MOP bunker buster bombs were only used for the first time last year against Iran's nuclear program, officials are already looking for a replacement. Its name is the Next Generation Penetrator, or simply the GBU-76B. While much of the program remains classified, reports indicate that officials want the weapon to be light enough for bombers like the B-21 Raider to carry more than one unit per mission. To meet this goal, they are reportedly seeking a design weighing no more than 30,000 pounds, and ideally under 22,000. That would put the bomb in somewhat of a middle ground, lighter than the 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, but still around 4 to 5 times heavier than the 5,000-pound GBU-28. The final version of the bomb should be able to drive through layers of concrete and solid rock, make its way toward buried facilities, and detonate inside chambers once considered unreachable. However, the Air Force doesn't just want a brute that can break through the earth, but also a more sophisticated weapon that can assess when and how to strike to deliver the maximum possible damage. With that objective in mind, officials have strongly suggested that any aspiring developers seeking to build the final version of the bomb for the Air Force should leave room for integrating advanced fuse technology. This means that instead of going off on a timer, these bombs could potentially be programmed to detect the different layers of rock and concrete they've passed through, and explode only upon recognizing that they've entered a tunnel or chamber. However, there's still a long way to go before America can effectively go after its enemies' underground bunkers. While there's still no definitive timeline for when the new generation of bunker-busting bombs will begin taking off, current estimates suggest prototype development and testing could continue through 2028. So for the time being, the US will have to keep finding ways to block, or at the very least delay, the operational capabilities of these sites using a more conventional set of payloads. Shortly after the Korean War, an implicit pact emerged between the United States and South Korea. America promised to deter attacks against its ally under the protection of its nuclear umbrella, while Seoul refrained from pursuing atomic weapons of its own, For decades, that arrangement held firm. But now, a nuclear future no longer seems off the table for South Korea. Back in 2017, America deployed the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, missile defense system in the city of Songju, in the country's central region, to fend off potential strikes from North Korea. For almost a decade, this served as a shield for civilians in the area. But just a couple of months ago, part of that same system began to be dismantled and shipped to the Middle East, after the U.S. considered that America would benefit more from using it in its war against Iran. For locals, the message was clear. U.S. attention is being divided between multiple fronts, and South Korea can no longer rely on the protection of its ally in the event that North Korea or China decide to turn their nuclear payloads toward the nation. Being a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the country can't just start building its own nuclear bombs overnight. However, South Korea has plans to start assembling a different type of deterrent. The announcement came in late May, when South Korea's Ministry of National Defense revealed that the country's Navy is preparing to welcome its first generation of nuclear-powered submarines. They will be known as the Jangbogo-N class, and according to defense officials, they, quote, play a core role in responding to threats, such as North Korea's submarine-launched nuclear and missile threats. The final dimensions and full range of the submarine are not yet confirmed, but according to some reports, the boat could displace around 8,000 tons, placing it in the same general size category as some of the world's most capable attack submarines, the American Virginia class. As of now, only 6 nations in the world command submarines like these: the US, China, France, Russia, India, and the United Kingdom. Unlike traditional diesel-fueled units, these boats can operate at high speeds over a nearly unlimited range, surfacing only when the crews aboard run out of supplies. With a system like this, sailors can carry payloads to almost any corner of the planet. Of course, not every nuclear submarine is necessarily armed with nuclear payloads. Still, some units, like the American Ohio class or the Chinese Type 94, can launch nuclear missiles capable of traveling nearly 20 times the speed of sound and covering 5,600 miles, making them one of the most lethal naval weapons in their respective countries' arsenals. Reports suggest that the upcoming Jangbogo-N class won't be designed to carry nuclear payloads, but rather to engage in longer missions aimed at keeping a better track of North Korean submarines and engaging in broader regional operations. However, details on the nation's new submarines remain limited, and it's still possible that when these boats sail off, they'll be far more menacing than anyone ever anticipated. But even if the Jangbogo-N class never carries nuclear weapons, that won't necessarily end South Korea's nuclear future. For now, Seoul is expected to rely on the United States for the enriched uranium needed to power its submarines. However, if South Korea were eventually permitted to develop more nuclear fuel domestically, the country would gain valuable expertise and infrastructure for handling highly enriched nuclear material. This alone may not mean the country will eventually choose to pursue nuclear weapons, but it would place South Korea one step closer to producing a more aggressive nuclear deterrent, if its leaders ever decided one was necessary. The drone revolution is reaching the seas, and not even the mightiest American ships will be able to sail into this new era of warfare without severely rethinking their tactics. It's expected that, at some point during the summer or early fall of this year, the 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt will set sail, accompanied by a medium-sized Seahawk unmanned surface vessel for the first time in her more than 4 decades of service. Officials have remained quiet about the exact objectives for the upcoming deployment of this duo. Yet it's been hinted that it could help define the future role of drones in the U.S. Navy. As of now, America's naval forces are struggling to integrate robotic autonomous systems with manned vessels, but the U.S. can't delay the development of an unmanned strategy any longer. During the ongoing war against Iran, the U.S. Central Command has revealed that enemy forces have attempted to strike American ships through the use of drone systems. There have been no reports of any large vessels being sunk, but Iran has claimed that some of its unmanned naval attackers have landed effective strikes against critical U.S. assets, including the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. The Navy can't afford to send some of its largest and most expensive warships into combat, only to see them damaged or even sunk by systems that cost a fraction of the price. A Nimitz-class carrier, like the USS Abraham Lincoln, can cost over $11 billion to build, while an Iranian Shahed strike drone can cost between $20,000 and $50,000. On the other hand, upgrading the defenses of every vessel in America's fleet is neither practical nor affordable, especially in the middle of a war. So officials can now only hope that drones will change how naval formations defend themselves. It's unlikely that sailors taking part in the mission aboard USS Theodore Roosevelt and the accompanying Seahawk unmanned vessel will see direct combat during their upcoming deployment. However, the mission could help determine how future naval task groups might combine large traditional warships with smaller autonomous vessels on the battlefield. The possibilities are numerous. As noted by Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Darrell Caudle, there have been discussions about using naval drones to deliver food or equipment between ships without putting human lives at risk. Other naval experts have suggested that unmanned systems like Seahawk, which come in at about 195 feet long and displace about 240 tons, could serve as a highly mobile satellite that scans the waters around larger ships to ensure no enemy submarines or drones are lurking nearby. Seahawk is not designed to carry out one-way attacks, and experts don't think that, at least during these early stages of testing, the unit will carry any offensive weapons. However, if trials prove satisfactory, it's still possible that during a future mission, the unit could be armed with missiles and gradually assume a bodyguard role, preventing destroyers carrying hundreds of sailors from having to absorb the first strike in a confrontation. This will just be the beginning, as Vice Admiral Brendan McLean says the Navy is already considering future duos. There have been talks of pairing the Global Autonomous Reconnaissance Craft from Black Sea Technologies, capable of performing reconnaissance and mine countermeasures across rough waters, with the more classic Independence-class littoral combat ship. McLean added, quote, "I think the important thing for us is to start getting into the rhythm of we're going to do this for every strike group now, and we're going to learn something different with every strike group." However, the path ahead is still not yet clear for the Navy. Most of the ships in its arsenal were never designed to work in tandem with much smaller unmanned vehicles. Some experts have noted that some naval drones could struggle to keep up with carrier strike groups. A Sea Hunter drone, for example, has a reported maximum speed of 27 knots, while a carrier like USS Theodore Roosevelt can easily reach 30 knots. Even more troubling, drones would require constant refueling during long-range missions. Certainly, the future of naval operations will require incorporating drone systems in some form. But until American officials determine how to address these incompatibilities and decide which pairings have the greatest potential, the nation will remain at risk of falling behind. Through the war with Iran, the regime is believed to have launched well over 2,000 attack drones against American and Allied targets across the Middle East. That's more units than the total number of combat aircraft operated by many European national air forces. Now, U.S. officials worry this barrage of strikes may start falling much closer to home. In early June, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Mark Wayne Mullen revealed that during the Miami Grand Prix, officials tracked and grounded 8 drones that entered restricted airspace. During the Augusta Golf Tournament last April, security brought down a dozen. In a venue packed with thousands of spectators, it would take only a single drone strike to trigger a crisis. The secretary did not disclose whether any of those unmanned intruders were armed, but he did confirm that their pilots were arrested. For many, the message was clear. American skies are under threat, and whether or not armed drones are already hovering over cities and stadiums, the country needs to establish a defense strategy at once, especially with the World Cup about to start. On June 2nd, law enforcement representatives and military units gathered at the Yakima Training Center in Washington state for a series of live demonstrations set to evaluate counter-drone defenses against the growing threat of surprise aerial attacks on civilians. Located about 2 hours from Seattle, one of the 11 U.S. cities selected to host FIFA World Cup matches, and spanning more than 327,000 acres of unobstructed training space. The base offered an ideal site for testing new technologies and defining the best tactics for deploying them. However, while initial reports suggested officials had successfully tested drone detection capabilities, interception techniques, and radio frequency countermeasures, Secretary Mullen didn't seem confident about how ready the country is to respond to a real threat. During a hearing held the day before the demonstrations over Yakima Training Center, Mullen declared, quote, "Our countermeasures with drones is, I would say, a vulnerability, but it's one of the areas that we are struggling with every single day. We've spent a tremendous amount of ability and money to be able to be very offensive with drones, but on the counter-drone measures, everybody is a little behind." Still, relying on conventional defense methods to fend off drone attacks during the World Cup is not viable. Launching missiles over a stadium could result in dozens of unintended casualties, while high-power electronic jamming would interfere with nearby communication systems and critical infrastructure. So for now, security planners may have to depend on a patchwork of defense tactics, including single-use interceptor drones, net launching systems, and even physical barriers. In Lebanon, some Israeli units, lacking proper anti-drone defenses, have been forced to wrap vehicles with mesh screens to defend against Hezbollah drone attacks. If current counter-drone capabilities prove insufficient, U.S. security officials could find themselves having to adopt similar improvised solutions during the World Cup. Still, there is one more hope for the nation to build a solid drone defense. Officials across military branches are seeking to add high-energy laser weapons to their arsenals. Just last year, the Navy tested the system known as the high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance, or Helios, aboard the destroyer USS Preble, with the express purpose of downing an uncrewed aerial vehicle. According to reports, the crew aboard the vessel was able to shoot down 4 incoming drones using a concentrated beam from a 60-kilowatt class laser. For reference, that amount of energy would be enough to power dozens of average American homes at once. In another recent demonstration, aboard the carrier USS George H.W. Bush, sailors tested AeroVironment's Locust laser weapons system, a mobile counter-drone laser unit that's reportedly achieved a 100% success rate against unmanned attackers. The one problem with laser systems, however, is that America has been attempting to add them to its arsenal since the 1970s, and while promising prototypes have emerged over the decades, high-energy lasers have yet to be incorporated into the country's main defense strategy, a problem some analysts have attributed to bureaucratic obstacles that stand in the way of financing and producing these systems. Yet, as drone technology becomes cheaper, more capable, and more widespread, the need for effective counter-drone defenses has never been greater. And whether to protect a World Cup stadium, a military base, or civilian infrastructure, the United States will have to find a way to overcome these institutional and technological barriers.